The BTFP CRE Commercial Bubble, what does it all mean? Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard as the Ainslie Group celebrates 50 years. Today, welcome back Alex, who actually wrote this really interesting and relevant article earlier in the week, but we didn't get to sit down and discuss it until today, and it was just too important to skip. So here we are. How are you going today, Alex?
I'm going well. How are you?
I'm going very well. Now, this was, to me, a really important piece because even though we've been talking about the components of what you're writing about for quite a while, I thought you brought it all together beautifully in the article. So let's start off by redefining for people who might not be really fully over it, what's going on with the regional banks.
All right. So everyone knows that everyone's been pricing a rate cut in March. Now, what's interesting is probably why that was being priced in. Now, the reason it was probably being priced in is because in March, the BTFP, so the Bank Term Funding Program, finishes. So that's the backstop for regional banks. So on the 60 Minutes interview on the weekend, Powell got up and said no March cuts and BTFP's ending.
I just want to pause you right there because two things are very strange about that. Firstly, that we had the Fed chairman going on 60 Minutes. Like, surely that's unusual historically. And also the fact that that program was coming to an end, because really, like, they said they were bringing that to an end, but that's kind of a big deal that they actually are, because most of us thought that never was really going to happen.
Yeah, so the year that Bank Term Funding Program, since Silicon Valley collapse and all of those, it was trying to allow these regional banks to give them time to shore things up. Now, in order for that to happen, interest rates probably needed to stay at the same rate or start to drop, because every time rates were lifted, things got away from the banks and they've got more mark-to-market losses on their bonds and they've got more to catch up. So that year, in order for banks to shore up, needed to stay equal or drop. In March, right now, we are a full % higher than where we were a year ago. There's been no catching up. This has been slowly getting worse for regional banks. But with the BTFP in place, they were able to just continue operating. They've got the backstop, nothing to worry about. And then, around December, January, the market started saying rates are going to start dropping by March. Again, the expectation of a rate drop, as you know, assists in dropping future rates. So that would have assisted the banks. But then on Sunday night, Powell gets up and says, I'm not dropping the rates. Maybe this year, it's not going to be 6, it's probably going to be 3, and backstop's ending. So he just decimated regional banks in one interview.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, so you've now seen all these regional banks dropping in value. New York Community Bank Corp, who bought Silicon Valley Bank or some of the assets, is now down 60%. So there's just, people are now thinking that the regional banks are going to collapse again, and it's March.
So it's kind of a replay of exactly what we saw last year, really, where the expectation, everyone's starting to look at those banks again, which then leads people to panic sell, which then feeds it seems like the setup in this situation was created by the Fed. It blows my mind. But before we go further into that, how does commercial real estate fit into this? Because you explained that really well in the article, and I think that's really important for people to understand.
So regional banks, because they're in an area, so Silicon Valley Bank was in the Silicon Valley, they lend primarily to that area. So for commercial loans, they know the area, they lend to it. So there's this concentration of commercial, particularly offices, with these regional banks. Now, I pull up offices because they are the problem. Since COVID, work from home has led to occupancy rates of around 50%, which is, if you're only renting out 50% of your building, and interest rates are going up, you're being squeezed because you've got less income and more expenses. Because unlike the residential market in the US, which does 30-year loans, commercial usually is sort of 5-year loans. So it's 2024, COVID, 2019, 2020, 2021, we're starting to hit this wall of refinancing for office spaces who've got this perfect storm of reduced rent and about to have interest rate rises. So I think the estimate is there's about 1.5 trillion in commercial loans that need to be refinanced this year in a total market of about 3 trillion. So it's like 50% of the loans are going to be done this year. Now, what's interesting with that is you've got the Starwood CEO getting up the other day saying the commercial real estate market was 3 trillion in value. It's probably 1.8. So it's a 30% drop in value against a wall of refinancing. And it's all it's primarily concentrated with these regional banks. And these, the companies that own the offices are going to have no problem handing the keys back when they're underwater 30%.
And that's the important thing to understand here, because this has been very much a slow-moving train wreck in this scenario, because we knew that was going to happen, right? Like we knew that those occupancy rates were down. People were talking about this 12 months ago. They were talking about this. We were talking about 12 months ago. This idea that where was the extra value going to come from? That debt is on somebody's books, and when it needs refinancing, the bank doesn't want to refinance it when the collateral's not there in the actual value of the property. And the people owning the property go, well, it's better for me just to hand it in. Like that just seems like a disaster. Well, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and it's still a disaster waiting to happen. The BTFP just really prolonged, like kept everyone's head above water.
It
So,
didn't prolong it. It's made it worse because 1%
yeah,
interest rate rise in the meantime means the
yes,
losses are even bigger. So just like, everyone always talks about kicking the can down the road. Well, the can got kicked and it's now in a worse position. And
which is
then you've
always the
got,
case with kicking the can down the
which
road in this, isn't it? Yeah.
seems to be what happens in the US. And then you've got Powell basically pouring kerosene on the fire.
Well, so what can we expect then? Because to me, when this program ends, so we've got that very soon, like we're in February, it's not that far away until we're expecting that to end. It seems like it really couldn't come at a worse time from what you've been saying, from all that background explanation. Surely they know that as well, right? Like it can't be news to them that this is a terrible time to be pulling the one thing that was keeping those banks head above water. Surely it needs to be replaced by something else like that. I said at the start, I thought it was a surprise that they actually said they were going to end it, because it seemed like a pretty sure thing to me that they just continue it. Is it going to be replaced by something else? How do you read what happens next?
Well, let's just look at the regional banks for a second. So looking at New York Community Bank Corp, for example, they have 477% of assets in CRE against a $116 billion base. Basically, if you just go through and do a calculation on a 30% drop, any regional bank right now with a CRE concentration above 300% is underwater on assets.
Yeah.
So in the next month, before there is a backstop, those regional banks are going to collapse. That's just what's going to happen unless someone says something now. Yellen, interestingly, last night said some banks might be quite stressed by empty office buildings. I think she's probably hit that on the head. So that's amazing. So they know. Yellen knows. Powell knows. Powell mentioned it as well during his speech, basically saying banks are going to disappear or merge. So he knows. Yellen knows. BTFP is going to end in March. 20% chance or just under, still pricing in a March rate cut. I don't believe it'll happen because Powell will hold strong. So they either extend the BTFP, they let the regional banks collapse, or they drop rates very rapidly in April.
And all roads lead to the same outcome, really, from those ones that you've described. Because so if they try and have all of those, they can't have all those cakes and eat them at the same time. Like that's not going to work. If they let the banks collapse, we're going to see exactly what we saw last time, the stock market tanking, and they're going to have to cut probably in an emergency scenario regardless. So it seems
So if you
extremely
just
reckless.
if you look at some of the banks and their assets right now, over 300%. So you've got City National Bank of Florida, Bank OZK, Valley National Bank Corp, New York Community Bank. There's hundreds of banks in America. It's not that they're looking at, $100 billion bank collapse, there will be close to $1 trillion worth of bank assets collapsing with the current rate of the commercial real estate market. So they're going to have to do something as usual, whether it's kicking the can down the road or dropping interest rates. Something will have to happen. And I just think that's why people were aggressively pricing in interest rates drops for March.
And we saw that in just last night, the S&P sort of hitting up that 5,000 level, which was a lofty target not that long ago, and now here we are. And that's really the market calling the bluff here because they've done the maths and said you can't let all these things happen.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want, you can jawbone this whichever way you think you want it to go, but you can't let $1 trillion worth of banks collapse, and that's what they're seemingly doing at the moment, and they know it.
So my last question around that then, what do you think the global contagion risks are here? Because this feels like it could be leading up to a equivalent of the sort of pointy end that starts a global financial crisis, right? Like we could be right at that point if they play it wrong. Are there global contagion risks? It seems like to me there probably would be. How do you think about that?
Right. So I've remembered the word that we were talking about before. So in the US, unlike China, we spoke about China last week about them having a huge bubble in their housing market. Most of that debt is actually kept within China. Not much of it is outside.
Yep.
In the US, in order to collateralize the debt, they syndicate the debt down to other people. So there's a bank in Japan who's just admitted that they've got huge CRE, commercial real estate exposure. Their share price dropped hugely on the announcement from Powell. So because the US generally syndicates its debt fairly well around the world because it's the reserve currency, a collapse in this sort of market, you don't know where it's going to be. You don't know which pension funds bought it or which other international bank has it. Just like the GFC, we'll find out soon, but there's about $1.2 trillion of losses somewhere in the world markets right now that is going to come out unless they fix this. So, they've got to get occupancy rates up another 50%, which is highly unlikely, or they've got to get costs down. That's it.
And neither of those solutions are imminent, and particularly when we're talking about a deadline of March. So it's not going to happen in terms of actually fixing the problem.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, they've now created a bigger problem from March last year, where March last year it might have been 400%, say, underwater on CRE. It's now 300%. So that threshold just becomes smaller and smaller, and the contagion becomes bigger and bigger.
Well, thank you for that breakdown today, Alex. It's something that we'll certainly be paying very close attention to because we're going to see a response. We're quite certain of that, one way or the other, and we're probably going to see it within the next month. So, yeah, we'll keep our eyes peeled on that, and we'll come back and say we told you so.
11th of March.
11th of March. All right, that's very specific. If we get it 11th of March,
that's the BTFP. That's the date. That's the BTFP.
And yeah, and we think, well, they might let that expire, but I don't think it'll be very long after that until the market has a hissy fit. So we'll hear about it. Oh, thank you very much, Alex.
Oh, good. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.